I am here with Matt, and could you tell us a little bit about what your role is and how that relates to this whole, SharePoint and online social networking?
Sure. My name is Matt McDermott. I'm a Microsoft Office SharePoint Server MVP, and the social networking thing, I just kind of fell into it. I like to do Facebook. I like to do Twitter. And I'm at Matthew McD on Twitter, and I find that there's a lot of business hesitation to go into the social networking sphere because they really see, a lot of businesses see it as a time waster, and so I've just become a real advocate for it, and because I can see where companies can save a lot of money by having a strategy around social networking, and so I come to events like this and talk and get a lot of good feedback from companies that really want to go that route.
Okay. What is typically the reasons why people and companies would just say, let's shut down Facebook and MySpace and Twitter and just let's kill it?
Right. They and it's funny because it's not even let's just not let people get to the URL, but even inside their firewall, they're like, no, we don't want to even talk about being able to do any kind of social networking, and the reality is that their employees are doing social networking whether they like it or not. I mean, we have mobile phones, we have applications that make it easier for us to do it right from our desk anywhere in the company. We can tweet, we can Facebook, we can do whatever, and I think that they perceive that it is a time waster, and what I like to do is show them that whether they like it or not, if you go out on Twitter, you can search for their company name and you'll find that people are talking about them, so they have an online presence whether they know it or not. Inside the firewall, I think that corporations are struggling to understand where there's the business value, and so I see the value in social networking just around the ability for companies to form teams better, have people of common interests being able to connect with one another without any kind of formal meeting program, and save a lot of money that way.
Okay. What are some typical or recommended strategies you would say for people to kind of pursue that route?
So a strategy, especially around SharePoint, is to have a plan. Is to really understand what the features of SharePoint are that support social networking, and then have a plan for how you're going to use them. For example, the SharePoint has this thing called a profile. Every user gets one, and it's described initially by the data that you import from either Active Directory, or you can connect it to a human resources information system, and that's information that the corporation uses to describe you. Well, you can also add other features to that so that employees can describe themselves. For instance, the name of my spouse and her birthday. If I'm capturing that as a company, then I can go out and I can, on their birthday, I can send them flowers and send them a card, and it ties the employees more tightly to the corporation because the corporation cares. And so SharePoint has this platform approach where you can extend the capabilities of the profile and really bring your employees into this level of self-description like you have with Facebook and with Twitter and things like that.
So there's obviously the SharePoint and the My Sites and all that out of the box. Is there any other Microsoft type tools you recommend to
Absolutely.
get into the picture?
Absolutely. Probably the most important one would be OCS, Office Communications Server, and the whole Unified Communications Framework. It's going to become much more significant as companies shift over to IP telephony, but just having online status capability. I was actually just having a conversation with a guy who said that he could never get the presence information to show up in SharePoint. He could never see the online status of the other employees, and he didn't understand why, because he thought that was a feature of SharePoint. And in reality, it's a feature of the communicator client that you have running on your desktop. And as soon as I told him that, he realized, okay, we don't see the value in instant messaging. And I said, do you see the value in IP telephony? And he said, yeah, we have a huge undertaking going on. And it's like, well, if you connect Communicator with your unified messaging system, you get a much more significant bump in online presence with SharePoint. And so, there's a lot of features that Facebook offers, there's a lot of features that LinkedIn offers that if you just think a little bit, SharePoint can offer those too. There's no wall in SharePoint, but you could write that as a feature, or you could just let messaging be Outlook. or instant messaging. So, you know, if you look at the whole stack, it's a real strong play because it's things that the corporation's already invested in. They don't need to spend more money on other systems because it's all there for them.
Okay. Would you say that there's any big no-nos, so to speak, as far as implementing this whole thing? Just
There is. Don't implement it without a plan. You need to have a plan when you do this. You need to know what you're doing with SharePoint and its user profiles. Probably the biggest tip that I give people when we're in the sessions is the fact that the manager field is like the most important field, because without that manager field being populated correctly, I don't have an organizational hierarchy, I don't have teams, I don't have work groups, I don't have that understanding of the system to know where I fit in the organization.
You know, obviously, you know, with these social networking sites, people would have the ability to often post tons of photos up there, right?
Absolutely.
What's the best practice there, or the recommendation?
Well, there's a couple ways that they can post the photos, right? One of them is that there's a library that they can post photos to, and when and that's really going to be governed by your company policy, because you set storage limits on their site for how much photos they can put up. But the other one is the image that they put up that represents themselves. So whether it's people search or they're looking at your profile page, that's the photo that represents you. And my thing is that if you don't put a photo up, the employee will never change it. They'll leave it just like it is. But if you put their badge photo up, they'll change it in a heartbeat. So my best practice is use the badge photos, the one that looked like they were, you know, Gary Busey on Santa Monica when he got arrested, and then they'll swap it out for a good photo of themselves.
Yeah. So what do you do about the employee who likes to post like 500 pictures of themselves and all of their fun exterior activities to the corporate portal, right?
Well, it depends on the corporate culture, right? Because in some companies that might be perfectly okay. They may be allowed to do that as long as they're not off color, as long as they're not derogatory. But you can control how much content they put on their site with a site quota. And so eventually they're going to bump up against that site quota and have to delete content. But it really depends on the corporate culture. It's really more about the culture than it is the technology.
Okay, all right. So what would you say as a call to action, you know, for people in general with companies and the whole social networking?
Right. I think probably the best thing they can do is if you're not part of IT, you should be asking about these features and capabilities from your company, especially if you already have SharePoint deployed. You should be asking why the company isn't embracing social technology to help foster team environments around the company. If you're a C-level executive, I think you need to learn about social technology and how it affects the company, how it can be leveraged for good and not evil. And then if you're in IT, I think you need to learn more about the features of SharePoint. You need to learn how to support this kind of social environment, because it really is a great business tool. It's a great way for companies to embrace their corporate culture and really be unique in the environment.
And is there any resources that you would point people to?
There are a lot on Microsoft.com. They have a whole section set aside for social networking, and there's a number of white papers that have been written about social networking with Moss. And then there's my blog, which is blogs.catapultsystems.com/Matthew. And Mike Giannotti is another Microsoft employee who just talks a lot about using social networking, and he has videos and all kinds of great content around how companies are using social networking inside the firewall.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you very much.
That's my pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.